Sorry, actually, I'm going to give that speech in English so that Shai doesn't feel left out. So how I ended up in the Hall of Shame, I think it's self-explanatory, and let's get to it because my wife says that I talk a lot, so that's right. So that's the plan of my presentation. I talk, you talk. It's vague on paper, on purpose. And the idea behind this speech is that in probably every modern language, there's this saying, smart people learn from their mistakes. And if you think about it, it's actually quite dumb, because committing mistakes costs money and costs time and usually brings you a lot of shame. So a better saying is this one, or now, or this one, or this one. Uh, so smart people learn from other people's mistakes. And this is the grand idea behind this speech, is that over the last 8 years, I committed countless errors, and I came here to tell you about a few of them so that you don't have to go through all the shame, so yeah, who am I? That's me, that's my best photo to date. So I did a lot of different things. I worked as different people, and I worked in different countries. So if you like doing calculations in your head, you are like, oh, well, 8 years of experience, but then he did front end and back end and, you know, process automation, and then he was a manual tester, and then the QA lead, whatever. So then you start dividing. It's like, oh, well, 3 languages, that's 2 years of experience in every, and then you divide by doing some other things. It's like, this guy did maybe 6 months of all the combinations, so is he an expert in everything? And my question to you is, do you really want to be? So keep that in mind, and let me just tell you that I now collaborate with this company, DataArt. So that's a bunch of facts, but the baseline is that we're everywhere, and we complete over 400 projects a year for clients big and small in a lot of different industries. So if you need something done and you need it done quickly and well, you can talk to me. Okay, so problem number 1, being the big fish in the small pond. So if you are an expert, you are the big fish. And the problem with being the big fish is that you don't have anyone to learn from. So everybody looks up to you to come up with ideas because you're the expert. And you have to invest time and money to actually get new knowledge, new skills, better approaches. And that takes time and it takes effort. So being an expert feels good, but it impedes your progress. And I was actually unfortunate enough to find my perfect set of tools very early in my career. In the second professional project that I did, I started learning Python, which is my favorite language to date. And I found out about behavior-driven development, which I think is the best approach to testing in general. So I started doing that, and I became an expert, and then I gave some workshops in Telefonica, and then it was widely accepted, and everybody loved it. So I felt good. I was, you know, this was my gig, right? And so I wanted to be an expert, so I invested more time and more money to specialize in that one thing, and then you know what happened? Then my project ended. And in the meantime, the company had changed its policy, and Python was no longer the priority language. So I realized that I have failed. And I failed because by that time, I only knew how to do backend automation in Python using BDD. And so to change the project, I would have to start everything from scratch and go through this period where I'm no longer an expert. Or I would be pigeonholed to a few projects that were left that either used BDD or used Python or both. So the key takeaway from this one is that being an expert feels good. But remember that becoming an expert is better because you grow faster. And especially to those of you who are junior testers, over-specialization, especially in the beginning of your career, is very dangerous. So let's jump to the second failure. 100% test coverage. It should say 0 bugs. I don't know why this is not there, but there's 0 bugs. So does that sound like a failure scenario to you? Well, let me tell you a story. There was this project where, in a retrospective, the lead developer told me, well, in this sprint, there were actually no bugs. And then I checked my reports and I was like, oh, 100% test coverage, everything in green. I guess we're that good. And then the next retrospective, he repeated the phrase. He said, well, next sprint, and we didn't really have any bugs. I don't believe we're that good. And then I checked my reports, and everything was okay. But something kept nagging me, and I was like, that phrase that he said, developers are not that smart. And I started thinking, and oh, that's actually a GIF, but it's a PDF, so it doesn't move. So then I started thinking, and then I figured it out. It was actually my fail, because I focused so much on automating everything that it actually affected the way I approach testing. I didn't review the requirements. I didn't try to put myself in the user's shoes. I didn't do anything apart from thinking, what's the easiest way to automate what we have to automate? And then the reports were all green, but we didn't find any bugs because I didn't actually do any testing. So later on, I found out an article by James Bach. By the way, he has a very cool autobiography book on how he, being a high school dropout, became one of the most renowned testers. And I highly recommend it. It's called The Adventures of the Buccaneer Scholar. It's a very cool read, so please do read it. And this is what he explained. I mean, this is the key takeaway. That's actually my idea. So automatic testing is not the newer, better version of manual testing. There's time and place for both. And this all goes down to this. So you can read faster than I can talk, so just read it. But what I was doing was actually checking. So checking is just the validation. And everything that you can write an assertion for is just a check. It's not actually testing. You're just verifying that the expected outcome is there or is not there. If you want to do testing, you need to do much more. And it actually goes down to this line over here, that it relies on exploration, experimentation, and I think I was drunk when I wrote it because it has a jump, has a grammar mistake, but it relies on exploration, experimentation, and the ability to make decisions. So until all the machine learning stuff is really cool and it can make decisions on its own, testers will have to be able to draw conclusions from what they experience from the project, and that's testing. So do more testing, less checking, okay? Okay, now another failure scenario, which is kind of contradictory to the previous one. A lot of bugs found each sprint. So how is that a failure? Well, if you think about it, bugs are like diseases. So every single doctor will tell you that it's much easier to prevent a disease than to actually cure one. And the same can be applied to bugs. If you find a lot of bugs every single sprint, that means that it is your failure. Why? Because you're acting too late. So don't act too late and try to prevent bugs from ever getting to the end product instead of trying to catch them all. It's not Pokemon. So how do you do that? You can do that in a variety of different ways. You can present the QA perspective to dev and management. On every single occasion, every sprint planning, every backlog grooming, whenever you can, you are actually the one that has the tester's mindset, so share it. It's when you are in a sprint planning and the developers say, this is very easy, maybe 3-4 hours of development and that's done. If that 3 or 4 hours of development will result in 3 days of testing, just raise the flag and say, hey, well, maybe it's easy to develop, but it's definitely not easy to test. We need environments, I don't know, devices. We need a lot of things. So raise that flag and present it to the audience, because your group, you share the project. So share your point of view with them. And it's not that developers hate us and just to spite us, they will develop something that is hard to test. Their focus is different. They want to create something that's optimal or beautiful. And if you tell them that it will also be hard to test, then they will adjust. And they will come up with a solution that's equally optimal and equally beautiful, and it doesn't require 3 days of testing, but an hour. And they didn't, propose the first approach because they wanted to spite you. They just didn't need to have the tester's mindset, that they didn't need to think about how easy it is to test, because that's your job. So share the QA perspective. And then familiarize yourself with all design documents. This is key. For you to be able to do testing, which means to be able to draw conclusions from the project, you need to know the project through and through. You need to know how it works and why it works in that way. So in a way, what I'm trying to say is that I forbid you from being a black box tester, basically. If you are the only tester in your group, you are definitely forbidden. And if you work in like a bigger group, then maybe 1 or 2 of you can be black box testers, and then the rest, you need to get familiar with everything there is in your project. Because I know that there are, the best tester is the one that thinks like a user would. But to a group, you're much more valuable if you know the project and you try to put yourself in the user's shoes than if you purposefully prevent yourself from getting to know the project just not to spoil your user mindset. It doesn't work. It's a false friend. Don't do it. Then assume nothing, ask about everything. And this is actually to more experienced testers. So I now work in banking. And when I started working on the project, there wasn't too much documentation, so I thought I will create test cases with, state-of-the-art knowledge, like, well, if it's a success, then it's going to be a 200 OK response. If it's a bad request, it's a 400, and so on and so forth. And I created that, and then suddenly I realized that someone wrote the UI router in such a way that they only accepted 200 OK responses. And if it was an error, they expected a reason code and an error message field in the body of the 200 response. And what happened then? When the developers in my group implemented it in what I wrote with, the 400 and 500 error status codes, then we realized that the UI router would redirect to a static 400 or 500 page, and because it was a single page application and they didn't implement the back button functionality correctly, it was a terminal failure, and the user couldn't go back to where he was. He had to close the browser and log in again. So then I had to rewrite 75% of my test cases, and they had to redo all the error handling in the application. Why? Because I assumed that that's how it's going to work. So assume nothing, ask about everything. And then, if you understand code, participate in code reviews. I think that the best approach to test automation is to automate tests in the same language that the project is written in. And that's because if you automate tests in that language, that means you know that language, so you can participate in code reviews of the source code, and you can actually spot bugs in these code reviews. And remember that code reviews are actually part of static testing, and it has testing in the name. You should do it. And then remember to look at the product from user's perspective. Like I said before, you have to know your project through and through, but you should also try to think what the end user would do or would think or would feel about that. So don't forget about usability and things being intuitive and clear, okay? And when I was talking about all of that, if at any point you thought, well, yeah, but present the QA perspective, that's more of a lead task, and then familiarize yourself with the documents. That's something our BA does, and then participate in code reviews. That's definitely for developers. Then you are guilty of one of the biggest fails you can be, of thinking in boxes. And if you think in boxes, you limit yourself and you don't take full responsibility for the project as a whole. So that's a massive, tremendous fail. Don't do it. So remember that delivering a project is a group effort. And stop thinking in me, my, mine. Stop thinking about us as a group. And that relates to the black box, not black box tester. So if you don't know the project, okay, a quick story. So there was this bug that was found, and the bug was that the page doesn't load for a given customer. So then a black box tester goes in and logs in on another customer, and he sees the same error, and then he knows that they have 10 or 15 customers. So he calls his other tester friends, and they log in on each of these customers, and in the end they created, I think, 12 different bugs. The page doesn't load for this customer, the page doesn't load for that customer, and so on 12 times. So then a front-end developer needs to go in and say, oh, well, we receive a 500 error from backend, so it's a backend mistake, and then the backend developer has to go through logs and then see what's going on. So you invest time of a lot of people to create many duplicated things in Jira or any other ticketing system because you don't know how the project works. And if that first tester wasn't a black box tester, he would then see the console in the browser, he would see the response from the backend, he would assume, or he would log in on 2 or 3 customers, and he would see that the requests are correct, and then the responses are 500 errors, and he would know that it's not a front-end bug and it's not a request issue, it's something in the backend. If he knew how to access logs of the backend, he would actually go there, get the stack trace, and he would create one bug that would actually point to the project, to the problem. So this is the difference in you being a black box tester or not. You are much more useful to a group if you're not a black box tester, if you know how the project works and why. So I think that's the best approach to testing. So the Hall of Shame. That's basically where this presentation gets its name. So once upon a time, in a city far, far away to the north, there was this agile board, and it had Hall of Fame written on it. And then one of the people that are actually present here printed a sheet of paper, and then he put it on that board, and then he scratched off the F and put SH inside, so it became a Hall of Shame. And what did he put on that piece of paper? Well, he put something like that. Well, actually, exactly like that. Okay, so close the mysterious dialogue. That's probably the best function I've ever written in my life. So yeah, you can be surprised that in 5 lines of code, 3 of which are comments, you can include at least a few anti-patterns, like using exception handling as branching strategy, and then hiding the errors, and so on and so forth. So why did I do that? Well, let me tell you a story. There was this test that kept on failing, and I tried it manually, and it kept on succeeding. And then I tried it automatically and kept on failing. I tried using different locators in Selenium. I tried everything. I tried doing it from the browser console, and it would work, and then it wouldn't. And then I tried disabling the test and then enabling it again on a different browser, whatever. I tried a lot of things. And then one day I finally found it. So there was a mysterious, invisible dialogue that was over exactly half of the button that I was trying to click. And And if you know Selenium, when you do element.click, Selenium clicks in the vertical and horizontal center of the element. So it was clicking exactly in the upper edge of this dialog, and it would fail. And then I would go and try it manually, and if I clicked above that, it would work. And if I clicked below that, I wouldn't think, oh, there's probably an invisible dialog hiding somewhere there, right? So I would assume that maybe the mouse didn't register the click, or maybe I moved the mouse and then it registered as a drag and drop or something, and then I would click again, and fortunately or unfortunately, I would click above the dialog and it would work. So when I found it, I was really happy and was like, this is the thing. So I created a bug, and then everybody said it was very trivial and they wouldn't fix it. And then I left the test there in red, obviously, because it was failing. But then the project manager told me, hey, dude, this is so low priority that you just, switch it off or make it green, because it bugs me, the red thing. So I wrote this piece of shit just to fix it, right? And now, after years of experience, I know what I should have done instead. And I'll tell you, I should have found myself something called a poking stick. That's right there. Maybe it was hidden in plain sight. A poking stick. I should have gone to a developer that worked with me, Alvaro, and he's actually not here. And then I should have started poking. I was like, hey, developer. And even if you know the developer's name, just use developer, because it keeps it more formal. Like, hey, developer, there's a mysterious invisible dialog in the middle of the screen. Fix it. And you have to remember that developers are generally stupid, slow sometimes. And he will probably say something like, whoa, a dialog in the middle of the screen? I don't see anything, because it's invisible, So, the cutscene, yeah, okay. So what I was trying to illustrate with the cutscene is that this was a failure on my part, and I know how to fix it. And how to fix it. It's okay for your tests to fail if they detect real bugs. So don't allow anyone to tell you to go fix it because they are bugged by the red light or something. Purposefully leave that test. If you automated it, you've made the effort to automate it. And even if the bug was trivial or something, just leave it in red. Leave it in red until the project manager says, what the hell is that red dot there? Why is it bugging me? Oh, let me tell you. So it's okay for your tests to fail if they detect real bugs, okay? And that's it. So if you have any questions, admito preguntas en español y en polaco. And the best question gets the poking stick for free. All right? Okay, cool. Any questions? Yes. Okay, so the thing is that if you wait until everything is developed and then you start testing, you are more likely to catch more bugs because more bugs are likely to be introduced into the project. If you start testing early, if you participate in code reviews, and there are requirements that are the usual sources of bugs, like there's an input and the business requirement says that it shouldn't be lower than 0. That means it includes 0. So if you review the code, you can see that maybe the way it is written, it will actually not admit 0. It will be from 1. And you can catch these bugs early on, and then you don't need to log into the application and then try to put a lot of values. And even if you use boundary values to lower the amount of values that you need to put to test all the different ranges, you still need to invest time in that. And it takes much more time than simply going through code and saying, oh, there's a bug, it doesn't meet the business requirements. And if you present even the main sources of bugs on the sprint planning, like saying, oh, we're going to implement something. And remember last time when we tried to implement something there, we had problems with caches, or we had problems with something else. People will be like, oh, yeah, that's right. Let's pay attention to not repeating the same mistakes. And so if you start testing early, meaning if you start sharing your QA perspective and you participate in the code reviews and you know all the business requirements and you understand what the impact of these new features will be on the system as a whole, you will prevent many bugs from happening. So you will actually you will catch less bugs later on. So it's just an indication for you. If you catch a lot of bugs, especially a lot of like those silly ones, the minor bugs, then it means that you probably could have done something to prevent them from ever getting to the code. Okay, thank you.